Okay, good. So I want to demonstrate a small video showing what are the challenges of working with notebooks in Git and how you can use Jupytext to solve this problem. I made this video for our teachers who are trying to work with Git and notebooks for their course material, but this is also quite general. So I want to sort of illustrate, first start by illustrating the problem and then showing the solution. So I will share screen. Yep, good. So what you see here is actually my desktop. So I've created a repository, Jupytext demo, to show you exactly how this works and where the problems lie. And because I need to have the problem, of course, if you're working on your own in a single repository and only having one person ever editing the file at a time, the notebooks are okay in Git. I'll show you one of the problems already you'll run into using Git with notebooks in this format. But let's say you won't end up with conflicts that are almost impossible to merge. But that's so in principle, if you're working really completely on your own and never ever anybody else is editing anything in your repository, you're probably okay. But the real problem comes when you try to collaboratively work on material, and that's what we do already in our course. We have this term, we've had 3 teachers. We were simultaneously editing files. If this was happening without this Git, without the trick I'm going to show you here, we would have ended up in absolute total chaos. So, but let's first illustrate the problem. So what I have here is this is my repository. And I've cloned this both to our group Jupyter Hub server and locally. So you can see this is I've got a local copy running on my computer on a local notebook server. Let's push this. Okay, I'm just going to close this tab altogether. Okay, so I have a local copy running here on my laptop computer, and I have here the copy running of the repository also cloned to our Jupyter Hub server. So what I'm going to look at in these 2 places is a super simple notebook. It just has just a line of code and plot. And actually the plot is going to be the problem. We'll see in a second. So that's the copy of it here. I've just synchronized these 2 repositories, so I should have the same copy here. They should look identical. I can double check that by doing a git pull fetch origin over here, and everything's up to date, so there's nothing to do. And I can also check here. I'll do a git pull on the command line over here. Here. Actually, I had to delete the repository because I created myself into such a conflict I couldn't solve it. Okay, so both repositories are up to date. The code is pretty simple. Now, I'm going to illustrate the problem. So, of course, I can edit code here. Let's maybe make this 101 points instead of 100 points. So in principle, this is a super trivial change to the notebook, right? And if I just save this, then in your GitHub desktop, in my GitHub desktop that I like to use on my laptop, then I can see, of course, I've only changed this one line here, but of course the Jupyter notebooks are potentially a file that contains a JSON file that potentially contains binary attachments, as we'll see in a second. And so it's not just this line, but you can kind of see it's not just this line in the code, but there's sort of all the structure around it. That's this code cell embedded in the JSON of the notebook. Now, this change here, I can already see the change I've made. That's still reasonable. I don't like seeing all this other extra stuff like source and all these brackets, but I can kind of see that clearly I changed 100 to 101. And that's, of course, what I'd like to have in my Git repository to track what I've changed in the source material. But now the problem comes if I actually execute this cell, because this cell also contains this graphical figure, which is added as a MIME-encoded binary attachment. So if I execute this and I hit save again, then what I'm going to see in my GitHub desktop, it says, oh, no, it's too big. It's a mess. I cannot display this. You can try to show it anyway if you're really brave, and we'll do that. And now you can see the problem because I just changed that 1 pixel. The binary encoded attachment has now gotten an incredibly complicated change. Now, okay, so that's already annoying because I lose the ability to have a visual overview, a quick visual overview of the changes that I've made. But that is not the biggest problem. So the biggest problem comes if, say, on my local computer, I commit this and I push. And let's say my colleague over here decided that this should be 102 points, and he executes this. I have to restart the kernel. And then saves. Because now, if he tries to do git pull, he's going to have a problem because of the fact that that the file has changed. Now, actually, this is easier to see in the GitHub desktop interface, so I'm going to git stash, and I'm going to git pull, which allows me to sort of, if I reload this notebook, should see it's back to 101. Because that's just sort of a way to like say, okay, I'm just going to save my changes in a little thing I can retrieve later if but it's kind of messy. So so in principle now I've stashed my changes. I can check my status here. Everything is up to date. We're all good. So now that's one solution. Of course, you have a conflict. You can always stash your changes and say, I'll just take the other person changes and we'll live with it. So, but let's say that we both make changes. Then I'm going to commit here. I push. And now let's say over here, I really did make a change that I wanted to try to somehow keep. So now say, let's try to get these two in sync again. So if I fetch the origin, I'm going to see now that I have a conflict. So we can stash changes and continue is what happens in the notebook interface. And then I can fetch origin, okay. Somehow I've not managed to generate a conflict. So, okay, so let's say I wanted to actually try to keep that. Now you can see I have actually a conflict, and that conflict becomes I also don't want to do that. It becomes messy. Okay, so you can easily get yourself into a total mess. So I'm going to discard changes, fetch origin, but now of course I've lost my changes. So what is the solution? The solution is something called Jupytext, and I've installed the software both on our Jupyter Hub and on my local computer. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to save this as a different file. I'm going to copy on the Jupyter Hub over here, text. And now I'm going to enable this. So if you install Jupytext on your computer, you will have this option, pair notebook with Markdown. And what that does actually is it makes you'll see in a second, if I just push this button and I hit save, then I will get actually 2 files. So for every time you hit save of the notebook, it will always make a copy of the notebook in a Markdown file. And this Markdown file actually contains all of the input cells, all the input content in a sort of very simple text format called Markdown that is required to reconstruct your notebook, but it doesn't save the binary attachments. And that's sort of the key. You can even take a look. If you click edit here, you can even see what's in this file. It's basically got some metadata at the top, and then it's got here special commented cells of the Markdown that tells it that these become Python cells when it makes a Jupyter notebook. And then the rest of these are just markdown cells. And the way that Jupytext works is that from your perspective as a user, these are actually the same file. And so when I click on this guy, then he'll open up and look just like, I can click on the Python file, the notebook file, or the Jupytext, the markdown file, and it'll open up, it will just look exactly like a Jupyter notebook. You can hit save, it will generate both the Jupyter notebook and the markdown file. They will always, and as long as Jupytext, as long as anyone who edits your stuff, this is important, has Jupytext installed, then the markdown and the Python notebook will always stay in sync. So that's all fun. But now we can also already see the major advantage, and that is that if I'm working in Git, because the markdown file doesn't contain any of these binary attachments, I don't end up in this headache of how to merge these binary streams of data that are changing just randomly. Because Git is actually very good at merging code, that's what it's designed for, and it can actually, in a pretty intelligent way, figure out which lines have changed, and if the same line hasn't changed, it will actually merge them completely seamlessly. It only gets into trouble when you have binary stuff where the binary bit stream is changing, and then it basically is useless for solving that type of conflict. So what we can do is I'm going to git add. Now the trick is, of course, if I could add both the notebook file and the markdown file to my repository. That would be actually redundant for anybody who has Jupytext installed, because if they have the markdown file, they can always click on it and it will automatically make a notebook. But the disadvantage of that is that if you have the notebook file in your repository, then every time somebody runs it and regenerates an image that's a little bit different, you will get this conflict that will be difficult to resolve. And then the only way to deal with it is to manually throw away the changes, which involves a whole bunch of clicks of the local file, of the markdown, of the notebook file. Because you can always delete, once you have the markdown file, you can always delete the notebook and regenerate it from the markdown file if you have Jupytext installed. So you have to be, so that the upshot is that you should really just keep only the markdown file in your repository. And make sure everyone who uses your repository has Jupytext installed, and then everything will work seamlessly. And then what will happen is that, first of all, the diffs you will see on your Git page will be really easy to read. You can just see which files have changed. You don't get this message that's 20,000 character binary stream has changed and it's too big to visualize in the diff. So it, first of all, makes it very easy for you to personally track your changes, even if you're working alone. But it also makes merging conflicts very simple, because there will be just a line in your markdown or a line in your code cell that has these little things which show you the previous, the code, the other person's version and your version, and you can just delete the extra lines and pick which one you want, and then save and commit, and everything will just work. So the proper way to do this is you git add notebook only jupytext.md, and you git commit, and then I'll git push from my server here, and I will see, of course, is over here. I will then fetch the origin, pull the origin, and then I will see on my local server that I've now got this notebook only. And if I click on him, I will actually see something that looks like a notebook. Of course, the image isn't there because the image has gone out of the source. But you also see that if I hit save over here, it will also, because I have Jupytext installed, I haven't made a change. It should also make a notebook. And there you go, there's our little notebook. So, and now the beauty is that if I go over here to this Jupytext version, let's say I want to plot, let's say this person decides that we want to plot x cubed, right? So I'm going to plot x cubed, git commit. So what I'm going to do here is what would have generated a conflict, which is basically unsolvable in without Jupytext. But now if I do this and this guy changes a different line, right? This would have could have previously caused a huge conflict. If I do that, and I have to make sure I ignore the file so it doesn't, GitHub Desktop is very greedy. It wants to put everything into your repository, which can be handy, but also annoying. Then if I fetch origin, I can put origin. So that we can see the difference. The difference is pretty simple. I don't know what's happened. Okay, so now I can see I have a now you can see I have a conflict because I've done a whole bunch of clicks. I don't know how I got here in this GitHub Desktop. But in any case, what we now have is that this file is conflicted, and you can see here the differences between these two. And in principle, what I can do is I can actually go and edit this in my, if I actually load that file again here, then I should see this conflict. And this is where it's noticed that things change locally. This is the upstream version. This is the one on from the GitHub, from the Jupyter, my other person, me on the Jupyter Hub edited. And here Git has detected actually both lines change. I didn't realize that. If I change only one line and the other line, Git would have merged these automatically. But because I changed these two lines, then it says, I don't know what to do because I don't know which version you want. And what you need to do is you delete this version, you can just edit. You have to delete these extra things that it's added, and then you pick the version of the code that you want to keep. And maybe I put, you just basically delete it and edit it. It shows you where it changed. You edit it to what you want, and you hit save, and then it will allow you to fetch. And now I have to put a merging fixed conflict. Master, push origin. And now I've actually solved the conflict in my Jupytext file, which, but that, if that, that would be a total nightmare if this was inside of a notebook file, because the conflict software does not know, it will not give you something that's easy for you to edit. Of course, you can always edit the JSON file directly inside of your notebook, or inside of like a text editor, but that is then getting really messy because you have to make sure that when you change the JSON that you don't screw up the JSON file syntax. Okay, it's all a little bit technical perhaps, but the main important point is that is that if you use Jupytext, you will it will be much easier to track changes of that you make to your Jupyter notebook, your code inside of your Jupyter notebooks, the source, the Markdown and Python source cells, and it will, in principle, completely automate the merging of changes. And if you do end up with a conflict, which actually in our course of editing the things for like months together, we didn't even want to do a single conflict. But even if you do it, like I just illustrated, it's actually not so difficult to solve the conflict because of the fact that it's a simple text file and Git can already change that file in a way that it makes it clear for you what you need to do. Good. So that's a longer video than I planned, but that is the basic idea of why and how to use Jupytext with your repository to make your changes trackable and to enable collaborative editing via Git of your source material in notebooks.